With that, we transition over to the college basketball side of things here now for our Handicapping the Hardwood segment. Obviously, this will be a little bit shorter, running longer here with the college football segment, but also there's really not a ton to talk about to some degree here, at least in a relative sense, with college basketball right now, because a lot of colleges and universities going through exam week, and that kind of alters the schedule as well as some of these handicaps.
Yeah, absolutely. You look at the schedule this week in college basketball, it's as slow of a week as you'll ever get in college basketball. So if you're a college basketball handicapper or better, this is a slight break for you. I know that, if you're handicapping other sports, it isn't really a big break because there's so much going on in, college football season, NBA, NFL, NHL, if you're doing that, things like that. But college basketball, definitely a slow week. You look at tonight, you've got 3 games on the board. You got some of the nights later this week, there's hardly any games either, Thursday and Friday. So very slow week in college basketball. So it makes sense that we'd have a little bit shorter segment for handicapping the hardwood this week. But I did want to say that this is a good time of the year to watch for situational spots. And I know that you've been doing the situational article there at Bang the Book. I think this is a really good week for it. I think the next few weeks are going to be really good weeks to look for situational betting. There's going to be some teams with long breaks, teams that don't play for 10 days or 14 days or something like that. Other teams coming back from long trips. After exam week, there's going to be a lot of games played in front of small crowds, less home court advantage. I think there's going to be some big underdogs win outright. And obviously finding those underdogs is the harder part because, it's not very easy to take a team on the money line that's, plus 20 or something like that. Actually, San Jose State almost did that against San Diego State yesterday. If you saw the end of that game, I think San Diego State was favored by 27 or 28 points or something like that. But they needed a 3 at the last second just to win the game. I think that there's going to be more spots like that to where afterwards you say, how did that happen? That team is so much better than that. There's going to be some really sleepy spots coming up here in college basketball. Look at these situational articles that Adam puts up at bangthebook.com. I think that while looking at situational spots is helpful all throughout the season, I think that the next 2, 3, 4 weeks, the single best time to situationally bet college hoops.
Yeah, I think so too. There's a lot of stuff in play. Like you said, I mean, if you are somebody who kind of models or power rates college basketball, lower that home court advantage a little bit because, students finish exams and they go home. They don't hang around the dorms or anything like that. I mean, maybe some of the commuters, come back in for the games, but a lot of these kids go home for the break, for the holiday breaks. So, a lot less home court advantage. Some of the players, maybe a little bit distracted. There's not as much going on for them either. If some of their, non-athlete friends aren't around, stuff like that. So those are considerations. And something else you mentioned too, and I kind of noticed this a little bit. I think I may have mentioned a game or two about this in that situational article, but you've got some of these teams that play these awful non-conference schedules, play 6, 7 road games in a row. They've got to get those paycheck games so they can, fund the athletic department. Well, they got to come home at some point. This may be that point because they've got to come back to class and take some of these exams. So there are some of those too. Teams that have been all over the country playing road games. Now all of a sudden you play at home for a game or two. That feels a little bit weird. That's a little bit off, especially because you may be playing in front of, 75 people at some of these schools. So situational spots definitely play a big role. You've got some local rivalry games this week. Iowa State on Thursday, Colorado State on Friday, UIC, University of Illinois, Chicago, and DePaul on Saturday. So you got some of those matchups, but also some of these games where, one team may have been playing, 3 games in the last 7 days. Their team may not have played for 10 days, so situational betting, always important, always a good starting point. But here, some of these spots may just be so extreme, they may be outright justifications for plays.
Yeah, and that's what I was going to say as well. A lot of times during college basketball season, I look for situations, and I'm not going to bet it just based on that situation. It's more if the price is right and that situation. Sometimes this time of the year, there are situations that are just so good or so bad that you have to bet it. So I think in the next few weeks, you might see some of those. And I think it was a good point you made about teams who have been on the road all the time. They play 6 or 7 games on the road. in a row, and all once they come home, there are some people who think that first game at home is a good spot to bet a team. I don't think that's true. I don't think you do either. I mean, it's one of those where you're so used to doing the whole road thing. You come home, especially at a time like this, where, like you said, there's less people at the arena. People have holiday functions. Students aren't around as much. And you come back to a home game, and in some of those cases, you're playing a team that you're not too excited to play against. That's not a good time to back that team. If you want to back that team at home, I think you want to wait till the second or third game at home instead of that very first time.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Completely agree with that. And, we're probably going to start, I know we got all the bowl game stuff, and there's obviously a ton to talk about with that. We'll probably start working in some more of the college basketball quick hitters, some little news and notes, some injury updates, some different things that are going on as we go throughout the month of December here and on into January, and of course, all the way through the NCAA tournament. But we do have a couple of injuries worth mentioning here on today's segment.
Yeah, a couple big men with injuries that really mean a lot to their team. Seton Hall, Sandro Mamukulashvili, quite the name there. I will say he's a very good player. He really helps that team a lot. And Powell has been such a good player for Seton Hall. He is really going to be a one-man team now because they needed that big man down low. He was doing a great job on the boards and scoring. I think Seton Hall is really a one-man team at this point, especially on offense. I watched that game last night. I had Seton Hall and Iowa State over the total. That loss, to be transparent, I had a bad weekend in college basketball. I'd had a really nice start, really had a bad weekend in college basketball specifically. Did well in the NFL, NBA was fine, college football was split, but really a bad weekend in college basketball. I had the over in that game. They played to 81 possessions, and just nobody could throw a rock in the ocean. I mean, it was just unbelievable, that game. That happens sometimes, obviously, and you just move on. But I will say that it certainly didn't help that he was injured right at the beginning of the game, and then you have Miles Powell out there just doing it by himself, and he wasn't taking very good shots, but it's because the other team knew that he was going to be the offense for Seton Hall. So Seton Hall is a team that I'd be careful about backing here in the near term.
Yeah, for sure. 81 possessions and 142 points is not a whole lot of fun. And both teams, they're struggling to shoot from distance, 12 of 49 from three. That certainly doesn't help there. But, another thing here, too, is that you get an injury like that, and if you're Seton Hall, you're starting to try and position yourself for Big East play. So while you don't have Mamukelashvili for the next 6 to 8 weeks, you may be experimenting with some things and trying to figure out who in the hell can actually help Miles Powell out. So maybe they slow down the tempo. Maybe they don't want to get into, some of these run up and down the floor types of games. Maybe they do because now they don't have a big man, so they're going to be more perimeter oriented. Watch for that. See if their tempo stays high the next couple of games. May take the odds makers some time to adjust to those types of things. So when you get a big injury, something generally has to change. Whether younger guys get more playing time and offensive efficiency goes down, or a team may slow it down or may speed it up because now they don't have to worry about that big man running the floor. Take a game or two and see what adjustments they make, and then see if you can extract some value from it.
Yeah, and I want to make a couple more points about that game just from watching it. First of all, Powell is not 100% healthy either. So now he has everything on him, and he is clearly not 100% healthy. At the end of that game, Seton Hall put on a press against Iowa State. And Iowa State looked like they had never faced a press in their entire life. I mean, it was unbelievable how bad they looked against the press. I would imagine that some other teams are going to play Iowa State and put on a press. And actually, some of the teams on their schedule do press. So that's something to keep in mind as you go forward, that Iowa State really needs some serious work against the press break.
How have you not, how do you suck against the press when West Virginia is in your conference?
Yeah, no. It's surprising. I will say that, they were setting up against the press, and Seton Hall has its own press up there. And Iowa State, just nobody is moving. I mean, they're all just standing on the court close together. Nobody's moving. And the announcers were kind of like, what are they doing? I mean, somebody's got to move. Somebody's got to come get the ball. Seton Hall got 3 or 4 steals, missed shots, or else they could have been right back in the game again. But certainly something to keep in mind with Iowa State. And, West Virginia is not pressing quite as much as they did in the past. I assume that they'll press still a decent amount, and I think that they'll want to press Iowa State after they see that. So keep that in mind for Iowa State going forward. I assume they'll get better at it. I think Steve Prohm's a pretty good coach. So maybe it won't be a huge problem later in the season, but at least for now, Iowa State very, very weak against the press. The other injury I was going to mention, Charles Bassey for Western Kentucky, suffered a knee injury late in their win against Arkansas. I know he was supposed to get an MRI yesterday, and I was looking, I didn't see any news. I don't know if it's come out so far today or not, but if Bassey's out for a while, this is a big hit to their team. They won against Arkansas. This is a Western Kentucky team that is a quality team. They're a good mid-major team, but Bassey means a lot to this team, and it would really hurt them a lot if he's out.
Yeah, it definitely would. 27.3% usage rate for him on the season here. 6'11" sophomore, and guy that does a lot of stuff for him, gets to the line a lot, very efficient down there in the blocks. So, again, very important to pay attention to these injuries. And if we think finding injury information in college football is hard, yeah, it can be very tough in college basketball, especially with some of the way under the radar teams. So we take a look here at some games, and again, we try to do the best we can here. We don't have lines on these, and as Kyle mentioned, 3 line games on Monday night in college basketball, but hopefully you were paying attention last week. We got you an easy winner with Rhode Island, looking ahead a little bit. So we try to do that here as much as we possibly can with some of these games later on during the week. But Butler and Baylor, one here on Tuesday night. We'll talk about this game, and then I have a point to make about Butler for later in the week.
Yeah, Butler has been really impressive so far this year. Nobody thought they'd be this good. Butler 9-0, and they've played some decent teams. They played Minnesota, Missouri.
Blew out Florida.
Yeah, but Florida, I don't know what's wrong with Florida, to be honest with you. I mean, they should be good. I think it's surprising, and I'll try not to go on too much of a Florida tangent, but it's surprising that Florida has as much athleticism as they do, and yet they want to play really slow. I don't know why Mike White wants them to play so slow. You'd think that they would be a good team at running, but I don't know. Florida, to me, still has a high upside, but I don't know what's wrong with that team. Butler, to me, Kamar Baldwin has been so good. I mean, this guy has really led his team well. He's a senior, takes over at the key points. He had a huge shot in that Stanford game where they won by 1 point. The win at Mississippi was a nice win, too, for Butler. So they've had some nice wins this year. This is really a big test, though. Baylor's playing well. We've probably given Scott Drew too much of a hard time in the past. He has done pretty well with Baylor. He's not in, Jim Mora Jr. territory in football or Rick Barnes territory for college basketball. But, this is a Scott Drew coach team where, we know what his teams do. They're good on defense. They're really good on the offensive glass. I think that the interesting thing to watch here is the rebounds. Butler's been really good on the defensive board so far this year. Baylor's played faster this year, but one of the ways that they score the best still has been putbacks. They're 7th in the nation in offensive rebounding percentage. They're not a great shooting team. They've shot pretty well from 3, but this Baylor team is going to rely pretty heavily on getting offensive rebounds. Baylor coming off that big win over Arizona, I think you could at least argue that this isn't a great spot for Baylor here. That Arizona win really meant a lot to him, especially the way Arizona had played so far this year. So I think this is an interesting game for both teams.
It is. It is a very interesting game for both teams, and especially because it's back-to-back big tests. Butler answers the call against Florida over the weekend. Baylor does the same against Arizona. If you can win a game scoring 0.86 points per possession, you feel like you got away with one a little bit. But Baylor been very good defensively, although the second time they've struggled on offense. The first one was Washington. Again, that was a game against that Mike Hopkins zone. Second time here against Arizona. Butler's a pretty good defensive team, too. So despite the concerns about, the high percentage putbacks, maybe this is an under type of game?
I would lean to the under. I think that Butler can control the tempo here. I don't think Baylor will shoot terribly well. KP has this one at 130. I would want it to be a little bit higher than 130 if I take the under here, but I wouldn't want to take the over. I'll say that.
So the point I wanted to make about Butler here, Saturday, they're at home against Southern University. Now, Southern University is one of the worst teams in college basketball. They're 336th right now, according to Bart Torvik. But they're going to be about a 30-point favorite in that game against Southern. That game is sandwiched between Baylor and then Purdue on a neutral. Now, the Purdue game is a week later, but Saturday game after exams, I doubt there's going to be a good crowd at the field house for this one, especially in such a huge favorite role. Southern may just be that bad that they can't keep this thing close, but I would not expect Butler to be at its best on Saturday in a game like that.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you. I think it's a really bad spot. I still think it takes, some stones to take the Southern against Butler. That's not really going to be.
Well, I've got stones, damn it. I'm going to do it.
I knew that was coming. But
Check back in with me next Monday when Southern gets to the window. Or loses by 70. I don't know. It'll be one of the two.
Right. One of the two. But, Southern's not an easy team to back. Really, a SWAC team against a quality team from another conference is not easy to back. I will say that I agree with you totally that is not a game where you want to lay the points with Butler, though. That's a very dangerous spot.
Yeah, that's the thing. Again, we use these situational spots as something to narrow down the card. And maybe you don't always have to make a play on them. But what the hell? It's only money, right? We'll make more of it tomorrow. All right, so also on Tuesday night here, Maryland and Penn State as the Big Ten playing conference games. So is the Mountain West. They've played a few. ACC's played a few as well. We've got one here between Maryland and Penn State, and this one is very interesting for a lot of different reasons.
Yeah, Maryland's first road game of the year. They played several neutral site games, but they haven't played a true road game yet. Penn State was beaten down by Ohio State last Saturday. Ohio State's played really well. I don't think they're quite as good as they've looked so far this year, but I think Ohio State's a quality team. They're very well coached team. Penn State, to me, coming off that loss, in a pretty good spot here, bounce back spot. Maryland's a team that's really gotten some very close wins here. They were fortunate to beat Illinois the other day, very fortunate to win that game. They were losing almost the entire game. They had some close wins against Temple and Harvard. Not great competition, decent competition. Penn State's played the slightly tougher schedule. Penn State's had a pretty good home court advantage here over the last few years. I think Penn State's a well-coached team. That scrappy kind of team that you don't want to have to play. Maryland, I love their talent. I think Maryland has high upside. I don't think Mark Turgeon is a great coach. I think that, he's not a guy I trust late in the season either. He hasn't really proven himself as you get into March. They've had pretty quick exits, have his teams. I would say that I think Maryland has a high upside. I'd be worried about whether they can realize that upside or not based on, the coaching staff hasn't really been that good. But to me, this one, it's Penn State or pass. I think Penn State will probably be plus 1.5 or something like that. I wish I could get more points, obviously, but I lean Penn State in this game. I think Maryland has been fortunate to go unbeaten so far this year. I think their upside's really high, but I think it's a tough spot for them. It's a really big test. First road game, Penn State in a bounce back spot. Maryland was very fortunate to get by in their last game. I think Penn State would be my lean here.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense, especially because you're talking about conference games where, things get a little bit tougher, things tighten up a little bit more. Also, again, this is a Tuesday night game. This is not a Saturday game. It's a Tuesday night game. The students are still there. They're still taking exams and all that. So true home court advantage for Penn State here. First really tough spot for Maryland. And something else you mentioned there a little bit, the strength of schedule discrepancy. Good time of year to start looking at those things too.
Absolutely. This is a good time of the year to be looking at strength of schedule where one team's going to have played a lot better schedule than the other sometimes. In this one, it's not a huge disparity, but there will definitely be some games like that.
All right. So do you want to talk about Army and Merrimack on Wednesday or, Fairleigh Dickinson and St. Peter's, anything like that?
I'm not opposed to talking any game in college basketball. I don't think most people would be too excited to hear about those teams, but Merrimack plays that zone defense that's interesting. And okay, maybe you didn't.
No, you're good. No, go ahead.
No, you've got Army trying to run up and down the court. You got Merrimack sitting in that soft zone defense that Joe Gallo plays. I think that's an interesting game because Merrimack is a team that could provide some matchup problems for some teams. I think I would lean Merrimack in that one. And Fairleigh Dickinson and St. Peter's, I can't find anything too interesting about that game. So maybe I'll leave that one to you.
That's fair. I did mention that one in the situational article, though. Those two teams only about a half hour apart. Those are always kind of interesting games to me. But, again, it's a very light slate during the week. And then Saturday is absurd. Gonzaga, Arizona, Utah State, BYU, Memphis at Tennessee, Oregon at Michigan. You got Syracuse at Georgetown, which Georgetown, that program is in shambles all of a sudden. You got New Mexico State, New Mexico rematch. A lot of good games coming up here on Saturday, but one that you wanted to mention specifically, and again, we love to go under the radar here, which is why we just talked about Merrimack for 30 seconds. Northern Colorado and Wyoming is one that's kind of intriguing to you.
Yeah, Northern Colorado and Wyoming. This is probably my favorite one of the week as far as the ones that we're talking about, where last week I liked Rhode Island. They did end up getting there. I like Northern Colorado here. Wyoming does not have a good team this year. This is a Wyoming team that I kind of wish they had been a little bit better the last couple games, because then we would have gotten more value in this one. But I think Northern Colorado is the better team. And also, Wyoming usually has the advantage at home because the other team's not used to playing at elevation. Northern Colorado obviously is used to playing at elevation. So, there's no advantage there. Northern Colorado, if you look back this year, they lost in overtime at Northern Iowa. I think that's a good performance, especially for a long trip. They were tied with West Virginia on the road with 6 minutes left. This is a well-coached team. Wyoming is a really weak team. I like Northern Colorado's chances of winning this game. I think they'll probably be favored by a small amount. I would want to lay the points here with Northern Colorado. And even the fact that they're just going to be favored, just tells you a lot about Wyoming. But I like Northern Colorado's chances of winning this game against a, quote, bigger name team. Wyoming is still the bigger name than Northern Colorado. A team like Northern Colorado's got to be up for a game like this.
Yeah, for sure. And again, these are the different types of spots you can look for. It's a little brother, big brother thing, or, getting a chance to beat someone from a stronger conference than yours. And these are things that are going to happen, with some frequency here at this time of the year with exams, as we mentioned, kind of a sleepy environment on campus. Those are things that you definitely want to be looking for here at this time of the year in college basketball. If you missed it, if you didn't listen to the College Football First Look, we did mention Kyle's new site, bettersportspicks.com. Going to offer up a lot of free information there, but also you still do a lot for huntersportspicks.com. What's going on over there right now, man?
Yeah, huntersportspicks.com, nothing's going to change. So if you're a newsletter subscriber, if you're a subscriber at huntersportspicks.com, nothing will change for you. Just Better Sports Picks is just going to be a little bit different site with more free information, some different offerings. But sign up for the free picks newsletter already. If you haven't already, at huntersportspicks.com, I'll send those over on the weekend. Usually try to send a couple during this time of the year. It gets a little bit busy, so sometimes I only get one a week out. But we'll be sending free picks, doing some contests through that. Lowered prices on the college basketball season pass, so you can check that out if you haven't already. And also, like Adam said, bettersportspicks.com is another site now where I'll be putting free information, have leans, things like that up. So you can go sign up for the free members area there if you haven't already.
Yeah, a lot of bowl game information coming your way over there at bettersportspicks.com. And, of course, as always, at Kyle Hunter Picks on Twitter. Kyle, appreciate the time as always, buddy. Thank you so much for joining me. We'll talk to you again next week.
Take care, man. Thanks.